is the Rugby Muscle Podcast, talking all that you need to become the best rugby player you can be. Now here are the Rugby Muscle coaches, TJ and Alex.
I'll give this example of how you can increase the weight but it decrease the reps and still progressively overload, because we want to make sure that week to week, this is probably the most important thing about progressively overloading, is that week to week we go we lift more volume. Okay, so volume is sets times reps times weight. So if you're increasing your weight, you ideally want to figure out a way that volume is still a little bit more compared to last week. So a good way to...
I wanted to quickly define volume slightly differently.
Go on.
Well, it's more of a consideration to take into.
Yeah.
That if you look more deeper into it, no, that's what I'm going to be pointing out. We have guys of very different shapes listening to this. Mm-hmm. Like a 9 is going to be very different from a lock, right? So sets times reps times weights times distance moved on the bar. I'm not saying people need to measure how far they're moving the bar, but just be aware if you're a bigger guy or taller, you're going to take more damage from doing a same range of motion lift.
Yeah. So but obviously for most people, actually this is something we're going to touch on hopefully in a minute, but for most people that distance traveling the bar isn't going to change week to week. So if you're comparing your volume to someone else's volume, that's a factor. If you're comparing your volume this week to last week, we would usually assume that that's the same.
Yeah.
The only time I would say that's definitely a really valid point and people need to listen to is when people really try and rush adding weight on things like bench press and squats. And so they add 10 kilos and they do the same amount of reps and like, I've progressed so much. And then you look at their reps last week compared to their reps this week, and guess what? They've cut out, a good 4 inches of depth on their squat. So are they really making that progression? Or
I totally agree. It's
you should make sure you keep your form correct. Anyway, going back to my way of progressing. And a lot of my athletes will see this. They've seen this at the beginning of their spreadsheet when we do a lot of power work. So like for cleans or any sort of weighted power work. Week 1 is going to be 3 sets of 5 reps, right? So you pick a weight that you can do 5 reps quite comfortably. That gives us 15 solid reps. Week 2 is going to be 4 times 4. So all of a sudden we've got 16 reps, and ideally we'll have increased the reps. Yeah. Wait, sorry, yeah. I knew I'd messed up somewhere. And then the last week is 6 times 3. And then, so ideally, again, we've gone from 4 to 3 reps. So hopefully we should increase that weight. And even if we keep the weight exactly the same, we will have moved faster and we'll have done 18 reps compared to our 15 in the first week. And that's a 3-week quick progression scheme that you can do. And you can write that down and you can take it to the gym with you and do it. Yeah.
Sweet. Have you any other ways that you track volume then, rather than just like that? Do you have rather than steadily increasing the reps or doing it sets times reps times weight? Is there any other ways you ever look at it?
Yes, and this is what we're going to talk about. More ways that you can. So what we've spoken about so far, I guess, are the basics of progressive overload. So most people going to the gym will, even if they don't realize they're doing it, will probably stick to this some way, right? Would you agree? I think most people do it. Yeah. But now we can also look at things like, so for our athletes, I like increasing the speed of a movement is a way of progressively overloading something. So again, hopefully by doing the scheme I just said, well, from 5 reps to 4 reps to 3 reps, we should increase that speed because we're doing less reps across the amount of reps. So what I mean by that is if we've done 15 reps by using 15 total reps by using 5 reps per set, probably the last 2 reps in each set aren't as fast, But when we look at our 18, we're only doing sets of 3, so they should all be at a higher speed. Also, as you just increase your speed, you should be able to perform each exercise faster. So we spoke about this when we were talking about different plyometric or medicine ball drills. A good way of progressing your medicine ball work is starting with a heavier medicine ball and decreasing the weight as you go, because you're going to be then moving that ball faster. It's gonna, and you make sure you, obviously, as we said before in the last podcast about keeping the same mechanics, the lighter weight should have you moving faster, and therefore that's how you're going to progress week to week.
Yeah, I like that. And actually, no, I'll leave it there. Actually, I was going to talk about progressions, but we don't need to talk about that yet.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, give me a way that you'd progressively overload outside of the norm. So, we've said sets, reps, weight, combination of those, speed. What else?
I'm just going through a list. I'm going to talk about the actual exercise choices.
Yeah.
And changing lever lengths and whatnot.
Excellent.
So, if we look at the basis of progressions.
Mm-hmm.
Did we do a podcast on progressions? If we haven't,
we did a while back. Progressions and regressions. Look it up.
Yeah, progressions, regressions, and
keep listening, and I'll tell you which one it is exactly. But carry on, Alex.
Okay, so and if we take a press up, because it's a really nice, easy example, which is a horizontal pressing movement, right? So to increase our difficulty from there, or the volume per muscle, we can look at changing the lever lengths on the press up to make each muscle take more load. So to take a big jump, if you do a press up, we'll call it body weight, right? Uh-huh. So say you weigh 100 kilos, you're spreading that 100 kilo load between both arms and both sides of your chest. But if you did a single arm press up, you'd be using one arm to do 100 kilos. So you see that's an increase in volume, a double in volume, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously that's quite a big jump. It's like 6 progressions down the list.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a big jump. But
yeah, as is an example that I could do with maths really easily. But then if you slightly take the load off one arm, for example, so you say you did a press up with one hand on a medicine ball, you'd be decreasing the range of motion one arm could go through, so the other arm would have to take that much extra load, thus increasing the volume.
Ooh. There you go. Yeah, beautiful. I also look at that like, and there's a bunch of I think this applies probably most to core movements, core stability movements, where because you can't just increase. Well, yeah, I guess you can, but it's a better way of producing a more effective core rather than just increasing weight or whatever. Is to increase the difficulty of the movement, add some unstable surface or something like that. It's a good way for the core. Now, I'm not going to say it's a good way to do any other. So say if you do 100 kilo bench press 1 week, and then to make it difficult, you then just decide to do 100 kilo bench press on a Swiss ball. No, just don't do that. Don't let unstable surfaces take away from your main strength training. But when we're looking at core stability, core strength, definitely adding in some instability is going to make that progress.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually. I'm not a big fan of Swiss ball movements, but, and we haven't actually written this one down because we're not physiotherapists, but movements we've added perturbation in as well is a little bit extra. So perturbation is you can call it like disruption or kind of oscillation while you're doing a lift.
Yeah.
So it might be say we're going to bench press, someone's slightly shaking you or slightly wobbling you when you're doing it. Or
you've got the bands attached to kettlebells or something on the bar.
Yeah, you could do it that way.
Yeah, just adding more, increasing the difficulty of the movement. I think that's what we want to say is the way of doing it.
So I treat that as a micro progression. Does that make sense? So it's not adding more weight, but it's adding something that's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
So maybe for next week you could add some weight.
Yeah, cool. By the way, just to those listening, number 26 is our one talking about why you have to use progressions and regressions. So going back to more movements that we can do or how we can change movement, I guess I've got 2 here, both to do with squats. Firstly is, and this doesn't have to be squats, it could be any movement, but pauses. Adding in pauses, either at certain portions, can increase the difficulty of a movement, or increasing the length of pauses, or you can start off with a 10-second pause, and that's going to dictate the amount of weight that you can use. So you could start off with a long pause, and then week by week reduce that pause, and therefore you're going to be able to add more weight and still do the same reps and still get a good progressive overload. Or you can keep the same weight and just increase the length of the pause. Another thing we can do is, as Alex said about before, with lever lengths and stuff, is do things such as Anderson squats. So you can, an Anderson squat is where you set the pins at a certain height of your squat, load up the bar there, and then you start in the hole. So you start from the bottom of the squat and then you drive it up. I guess I'll put this on the Instas, tj.strength. You start in the hole, and then the way
squats at the moment.
No, I'm not.
I've got a client doing them. I'll get him. I'll video from him.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, save your hips, mate.
But Anderson squats are great because this is like the first dude that I can't remember what his name is. Something Anderson. Something Anderson.
Is it Mr. Anderson?
I'm pretty sure it's not a Mrs. Anderson. So Mr. Anderson, what he did was he didn't have access to different weights on the barbell. He had access to one pole, and he filled up 2 cement buckets or something on either side, okay? And all he would do is he would dig a big hole for himself to stand in and then squat that weight up. And as he got stronger, he would just gradually, week by week or session by session, fill in that hole so he starts his squat from deeper. And that's what you can do to progress your lift. You can keep the weight the same. And this is a good way of doing it. If you struggle with hitting depth on your squats, I prefer these to box squats. So you start from the bottom position. Say you start at about 2/3 of your depth, or what your normal depth is. Squat the weight up for a set amount of reps. Keep the weight the same the next week. Come back to it, but set the pins 1 pin lower, and you go 1 pin lower until you're at a good depth of squat, whatever that is for you. That doesn't necessarily mean arse to grass. It just means what's a good depth for you.
Paul, by the way, mate.
Paul Anderson.
Yeah.
There we go.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you there.
Oh.
I don't think if your squat depth isn't secure and correct for yourself, then I don't think you should have a bar on your back.
So I
think that you should be doing goblet squats or bodyweight squats or maybe even lunges until.
But the reason I added this in is because I think it's tough on the old ego. People don't like to go from 150 kilo shit depth squat and then I'm gonna go, oh no, actually just do goblet squats or whatever.
I'd say to them, try and load up two 75 kilo kettlebells on each hand and do a squat and see if they still want to squat 150 kilos.
Anyway,
yeah,
let's move on.
The ego shouldn't really. Yeah, I guess it does come into it. Okay, so let's talk about. So we're going quite a few quite advanced ideas now that potentially people don't need to use.
Yeah, especially when we're talking about basics. This is like, now we're going to get into nitty gritty things that, like, this is when it's like we're training really different goals. We're training rugby specific goals almost with most of these now, that as we get into it. These aren't maybe not necessary if you want to just get jacked, but definitely if you want to perform better, want to consider these methods. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to make it real simple and just do another day of squatting. Just squat more often. If we're talking about squatting, increase your volume by just doing something more often. Increase
your frequency. So you could do, say you do the same session 3 times a week. You could just do that session for a 4th time in that week, or just have a fatigue management day. Where you do just go in and just get 1 extra set in of a few different movements, or 2 extra sets in, and that is going to hopefully not interfere with your recovery. In fact, it might even promote it. And it's going to add in that volume for that week, because when we want to talk about progressing week to week, that's not necessarily session to session. That's 1 week or one microcycle to the next. So a good example of this is me, where I've done a poorly timed training program here, where I'm looking at it's just real basic, but I was training 6 times a week, 6 sessions a week for 2 or 3 weeks, or for a long while. But this Saturday is going to be my first game of the year, and therefore I'm not going to be able to train 6 times a week because I'm going to have a game, and therefore I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to progressively overload this microcycle compared to last week's. And the way I'm going to do that is going to squeeze in my stuff into 3 or 4 longer sessions, and then 1 or 2 shorter power sessions that aren't going to fatigue me for my game. That means that I've actually decreased my frequency, but everything else has increased. And again, my week to week volume has increased.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah,
Definitely.
And that's something that definitely people need to bear in mind when they are looking at hypertrophy during the season, is trying to figure out how you can
when we're talking,
spread it out. Go on.
As well, when we're talking about this, so say we're going to use squats, so squats quite a good example. Just because we say, okay, squat another time a week, it doesn't mean that we want you to back squat 4 times a week. Mm-hmm. There's no reason you can't do a less intense variation.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do sets of 5, heavy grinding sets of 5, or really tough sets of 10, or really heavy sets of 3, or work to a max. Add in a different rep scheme. Sets of 20 are a really good way, and I've got a YouTube video that should be up by now explaining a bit more about this, about how full body workouts can actually work out better.
I actually have everybody, including myself, on full body workouts.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I get upset when people do splits. So I heard about this person, and they came to me and said, okay, this is what I'm doing, and they'd been training less than 6 weeks in total, and they were on a push-pull split. I was like, well, you just don't need to. Just do everything. Yeah. You're not going to hurt yourself. So.
I think something, if you're trying to increase your frequency of your training, to bear in mind is, like, literally doing this extra session will probably blow your mind, because people think, I already trained, like, say you trained, so a good example was already for me, where I did barbell close grip bench press yesterday, and the day before I did a load of chest work. And guess what? I still managed to do it. I didn't die. People think that because you've trained a body part one day, there's no way you're going to be able to do anything with it the next day. That's just not true.
Yeah.
There's smarter ways of doing training. But that's not what we're trying to talk about here, Alex. We're talking about progressing or progressive overload. When we're looking at increasing overload, because this is one thing, I know the time has already gone off, but we're going to have to run over here again every single fucking
We never do that.
I know. If we're looking at conditioning, you have to progressively overload for your conditioning to still work as well. It's not a case of just
that's a really big point that
and
I hadn't thought about.
People always forget that. So they say, just do 30 minutes on the bike. But if you do 30 minutes on the bike week after week after week after week, that 30 minutes, if you do it at the same speed, especially, if you don't progress that bike week to week, you're actually going to burn, and it depends what you're doing it for, but if that 30 minutes is going to have a lot less impact on you in terms of calorie burning, in terms of aerobic or any sort of cardio work that it's going to benefit you. It's just not going to be as good. You do have to progress. Now, the most obvious way people do it is 2 ways. Number one, you increase your distance. So overall, you cover or you get more work done. Okay, so you
well, more work done or more work done in time.
No, these are the 2 different ways. So you can either keep the intensity the same, okay, but work for a little bit longer. and that's going to still work you a little bit better. That's going to make a progression. Or you can do the same length of time, but get more work done in that time. So increase the amount of work. So you increase your speed if you're running, increase your reps if you're doing some sort of circuit thing. What else? Increase your reps if you're doing tempo work. Decrease your rest if you're doing intervals is another way you can do it.
Well, I was just about to say this. What we're moving into now is increasing the density of training.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So getting the same amount of, or getting more work done in less time, or the same amount of getting the same amount of work done in less time, or more work done in the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pow. Again, you can increase resistance if you're doing bike stuff. What?
Sorry, mate, you cut out for a second. I was asking a question, but you already answered it.
Yeah, so we can increase the resistance if we're doing bike things. That's another way of getting more work done. We don't have to just look at it. Well, I guess that is still distance, because you're basically going in a higher gear or a lower gear. I don't know. I don't have a road bike. But yeah. Make sure you're increasing the
higher resistance the further you go per pedal.
Okay? Yeah. See? So you are increasing distance. And then for speed work, you're going to progress that by having it be... Well, there's a few ways. Again, you can increase your density, so have a little bit less rest if you can. Again, remember that you need to be fresh for your speed work, though. Do more sets or reps of your speed work. Do the speed work for a little bit longer of a distance, or again, you can change the exercise to make it more specific to actual sprinting. So, for example, week 1 could be walking, pushing a sled, and just to get your mechanics down. Week 2 could be bounding, pushing that sled, so you're just driving it. Week 3 could be sprinting, pushing that sled, and then week 4 could be just sprinting. And that way, what you've done is you've gone from technical to you've increased the you've increased the intensity to have it more and more and more like actual sprinting.
Yeah, I really like that, actually. That's smart. But when you get up to higher intensity speed works, pardon me?
Go on.
I think when you get to more higher intensity speed work, I think this is me personally, I'm not saying anyone else. I'd actually prefer adding in extra sessions rather than increasing distance.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a cap on increasing different distance, whereas I think you can probably get quite a lot of doing 2 speed sessions in a day.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. And now that's about. You've got any other ways that you can increase your progressive overload?
We spoke about like compensatory acceleration stuff.
Oh yeah. So if you're doing power work, so if you're doing like depth jumps, increase the height of the box.
Power work, but...
Yeah.
So
there's a bunch of other ways.
Overloading stronger ranges of movement.
Yeah. But make sure you're writing it down week to week, because that's the biggest headache I get, is if you're not writing stuff down, you're never going to be certain. I don't care who you are. If you're not writing your weight down, you're not going to remember exactly how many reps and sets of exactly weight for each exercise that you did. So make sure you log your shit down. And then times you wouldn't always progressively overload is something I've written in here.
Do you want to cover that? Because I've just seen you written it down.
Yeah, so there are times where, well, obviously deloading, number 1. If you're peaking, so what we said in the last podcast for MMA athletes, they would reduce their volume and intensity coming into a fight. You would do it coming into a big tournament or a big game. You would lower your training volume a little bit. So you wouldn't, because your concern isn't getting better in the gym. Your concern is getting better on the pitch. So you're going to try and reduce fatigue as much as possible.
Peaking's a weird one. That people think that when they peak or come up to an event, what they need to do is train really fucking hard.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas really, the idea of peaking isn't to get any stronger. All that strength work should have been done already.
Yeah.
It's to feel good when you get into the event.
Yeah. It's to reduce that fatigue so that then your performance can be as high as possible. Because all this training is, and progressing week to week to week, is going to gradually, over the weeks, increase fatigue. And you want to get that down in order to in order to perform at your best. And then one more I'd say is just stress, like outside involvement of stress may sometimes mean that rather than like your body just isn't going to be able to cope with this progressive overload. So you might just have to keep things the same for a little bit. And then that is a good thing because when that stress reduces, you should be able to increase that volume and overload a lot better than what you would have done if you were in this stressed time.
Before we time out here, let's have a chat quickly about deloading.
No,
because we can't progressively overload indefinitely.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right, that's it.
So I'll just do it really quickly, mate. You can't keep adding weight or increasing your density, etc. You can't keep using these methods that we just spoke about indefinitely. At some point, your stress levels on your body is going to increase so much that you need a break. Otherwise, you're going to get hurt or you're going to see a decrease in performance.
Yeah.
So when you stop being able to do what you could do previously, it might be time to take a break and not reassess, but just have a break, let yourself relax for a little bit, and come back at it.
Yeah, beautiful. I think I've said this before about like if you say you squatted 100 kilos, okay, and you added 5 kilos every single week, you're squatting 350 kilos in a year. It's not realistic.
Yeah.
It's just the way the body works, and people that say that you don't need to deload, you don't need to deload. There's no need for it. You're not training hard enough if you don't need to deload. Quickly, actually, if you want more information on deloading, hit us up and we'll do a whole podcast on it. If you want it right now, go ahead and go to rugby-muscle.com, click on the blog, and I've done a video on it, so I'll link that in the show notes at rugby-muscle.com. Or you can just look up TJ Strength Deload on YouTube's, and you'll see me explain all of that. We're going to keep going, Alex, because I need to read out these reviews that we've been sent in. I'm so chuffed to be.
There's some nice reviews actually.
So just 2 reviews. If you give us a review on iTunes, give us 5 stars, little write up. It takes like literally a minute. Go on the podcast app on your iPhone, or just go on iTunes on the interwebs if you don't have an iPhone. I don't know why you wouldn't. I don't know why you'd have an Android, but whatever, that's you. We've got Brooksy here, says, great info, great fun. Been listening to TJ and Alex for about 6 months now, and they've supplied me with some great info on how to progress my game. Recommend this to all players at any level. Keep up the good work, guys. Thank you so much, Brooksy. Hit us up, get in touch, respond to one of our emails, or hit us up on our socials. You know how to do it, and we will give you something good. We'll give you some good shit. I'm gonna give you a little treat. And then Hamer9 says, great podcast. Always love listening to TJ and Alex. Picked up a lot of tips to implement into my own training. Hopefully you have as well, the listener. That'll be it for this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Again, if you can give us a review, we're going to give you some treats. Alex, anything to say? We're not plugging because we've ran over.
Nah.
All right, chaps. That'll do us for now. See you later. See you next podcast.